Hi, everybody. So I am here. Sorry we're late in getting this started, but I'm here with my friend Tom, and we are going to be diving into the world of Star Trek. I've been a big Star Wars fan for years, but I've never gotten into Star Trek. I actually have never seen a single episode of the show. So this is going to be interesting. The only movie before this one that we're going to talk about today that I had seen is the 2000 I think 9 the reboot J.J. Abrams reboot movie. So I am a complete Star Trek greenie. But I'm here with my friend Tom. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Tom Gunn, here in Seattle, and a lifelong Star Trek. Started when I was about 3. I started watching the original series for the premiere of Next Generation when I was 8. I remember that night. Yeah, I've seen all the Star Trek that exists to be seen. It doesn't officially exist as fan films and that kind of thing. About it, I can't say I've written about it much, but the first books I read were Star Trek books, right? So I think my fan bona fides are unassailable.
Cool. Okay, yeah, it's going to be really fun. I think it will be a good contrast, kind of me experiencing for the first time. So we're going to talk about Star Trek: The Motion Picture today, and this was released in 1979, and it was 10 years after the end of the show, but 2 years after Star Wars, changed everything, and. So I wrote up a little summary that I do on these podcasts of the events of the film. So I'm just gonna read that real quick, and this will be a spoiler podcast. So watch the movie before you see this. But here's my little summary. It says, to start off Star Trek: The Motion Picture, 3 Klingon ships are destroyed by a cloud of energy. Then the Enterprise is getting a major retooling under the guidance of Captain Decker. Captain Kirk comes in and announces he is now the admiral and captaining the ship. Problems commence when a transporter kills 2 officers and the engines don't operate correctly. Decker and Kirk are in conflict, and Spock arrives saying that he felt a consciousness that emanates from the cloud. Enterprise explores the cloud and finds out that an alien ship has been absorbed within. This cloud attacks the Enterprise and replaces the navigator, Ilya, with a robotic clone. Decker is upset because he is in love with Ilya. Spock dives into the cloud and finds out it is a bridge called a Viger, a living machine that is actually sentient and wanting to consume all to be stronger. In order for it to be satisfied, it must meet its creator and birth a new entity. Decker and Ilya combine with the Viger to create a new life, and they all disappear. This saves Earth, and the Enterprise moves on to the next adventure. So, I don't know, what do you think? Do you think that was a pretty good summary?
Pretty good. You kept mispronouncing things, which made me crazy. It's Ilya.
Okay.
Okay. Other than that, and also, did you mention that V'ger is actually a probe that was sent out?
No, I did not. So
that,
it was
that is important. It's a huge spoiler. It's a huge spoiler, but it is important. Okay. Our space probe.
Right.
In the end, they get until they're sitting on top of it, but that's an important point to make.
Right. Okay, good. Okay, so my first question is, so this was 10 years after the series. As someone who knows the series really well, this was helmed by Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek. How do you think, or was written, I guess, by him. How do you think that it fits with the series as far as tone, style, quality, everything like that?
Well, I think it would hold up as a perfectly good original series episode. A couple of things to note about the original series. The character of Decker, Captain Decker,
Mm-hmm.
is an episode in which Captain named Matt Decker, huge machine that was just destroying entire planets, and he did everything he could to try to stop it. And a bunch of Federation colonists were killed. This failure sort of haunted him. Was killed. So the Enterprise comes upon him, wreck, and by the end of the episode, he's sends the remains of his ship into the belly of this beast that's been destroying planets. All right, so he commits stop this thing in sort of a Moby Dick move. So Kid is supposed to be Captain Decker in this movie. Sense of like, so in order to understand Captain Decker, it might help you to know that, oh, his father died in a mission that was a failure. When you think about how he's handled Captain Kirk, and a young guy who's got something to prove, and Captain Kirk is sort of the cleaned up his father's mess and maybe tainted his father's reputation a little bit. There. And there's something going on there too. But also, this is a lot like an original series episode. Excuse me, the Changeling. It runs across this space probe that's a very tiny spaceship. But it's just a probe. And, it's looking for its creator, and it starts killing people on the Enterprise left and right. For its creator, and then it finds, oh, and he mistakes Captain Kirk for its creator. Summary of the episode, but this is a lot like that episode.
Okay, cool. So it sounds like it does keep within the tone and spirit of sort of the original show then pretty well.
Yes, but Emma, I'd say the biggest contrast is the sense of cinematic grandeur. This time around watching it, I tried to put myself in the shoes of someone. Scene was either the animated series 5 years prior. Okay, I mean, the writing was good, but the look was terrible. On a screen, yay big. Mm-hmm. I sit down and I hear an overture, right? A model that's just grand and enormous and real. Yes, it's a Star Trek story. And I would be losing my. Suddenly, it feels real. Happening in a universe that feels that there's no more styrofoam and stupid looking suits, and it all looks great.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of static. It keeps interrupting everything you're saying. Are you having that problem with me?
A little bit.
I'm having problems with my internet today. I don't know why. Sorry about that. I don't mean to be rude. I want.
If I turn my camera off.
What's that?
If I turn my camera off.
Yeah, I mean, we could try that. See if I can.
The bandwidth.
Let's see if I can hear you, because it's more important I hear you than anything else. Okay, let's try that. See how it goes. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so this was directed by Robert Weiss, who actually has a horror background in a lot of his previous films. And I'm wondering if you can sense any kind of horror tone or feeling or any of that within the film.
Because I think we might be looking at different Robert Weisses. Weiss has a pretty diverse background in Hollywood. His credits include Citizen Kane. He didn't direct Citizen Kane, but he was involved with it. But he directed West Side Story, The Sound of Music. Still,
he was editor, I guess, on Citizen Kane. Yeah, you're right. I just seen The Body Snatcher, The Day There's.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Anyway, there were just The Haunting. He was famous for the Andromeda Strain. There were just a number of horror movies, so I that's what kind of made me think that if I could see any sort of that background in.
I wouldn't say I see much horror. Creepy the way Ilea is taken over by the Major Girl. Also, Accident, which is terrifying. There's something about the sound editing on that scene that is great. The screams and the way they're sort of twisted is terrifying, and it makes you never ever want to get in one of those things. Boy, it looks like a Luddite and more like a genius for not wanting to get in one of those.
Yeah, that's true. Well, and I just felt like the whole idea of the cloud was kind of had a bit of a horror feel to it, sort of absorbing everything, and it was kind of scary in a way, and just sort of, I don't know, it's sort of a supernatural horror kind of a feel to it.
Lovecraftian to it because it's so immense. On IMDb, that in the original script to be in size, it's from the Earth to the Sun. So we're talking about the solar, that is already unimaginable. We cannot wrap our heads around that size.
Wow.
Revised it down. They edited the sound so that it was only 2 AUs. But still, that you could the solar system could fit in it just fine. And that kind of like small in the face of that kind of size, right? It's a sort of Lovecraftian horror element there. The fear of the unknown and the fear of something that makes you.
Yeah. Okay. So, gosh, I wish we weren't having these stupid internet problems. Okay. It's still a little bit jumpy, but gosh. Okay. So, the movie went through a lot of different treatments, writers, etc. It was originally going to be a pilot for a TV show, for a phase version of the show, and then it was expanded into a movie. And I guess, can you kind of tell that it was originally a pilot? Are there things that make it feel?
Yes. Frankly, yes. It does feel like a stretched out episode.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's the biggest argument against it. If there's anything to be said against it. Yeah, it does have that stretched out pilot feeling.
Yeah. I think so, especially on certain, I guess as good as places any to talk about it. I felt like it was very self-indulgent, the movie. I mean, it's one thing to have long tracking shots of a ship or of to create atmosphere and tone, but these were so long, and certain things would be so long that it was like, okay. As somebody who's not a fan or has it was just sometimes a little frustrating.
Yeah, no, I my first experience in watching this movie was I had already seen, I think, 2 through 5, and I caught this on TV.
Mm.
And I was startled, first of all, by the fact that the Next Generation episode, or the theme to Star Trek The Next Generation was not the theme to Star Trek The Next Generation. It was the theme to the motion picture. That was the first thing that kind of rattled me.
Mm.
But then also I was like, what happened? Because yeah, it's so, yeah, it moves along so slowly in so many places. The wormhole scene is just, it hurts. It just hurts. I cannot sit through that without wanting to fast forward through it. And I'm a fan.
Right.
Right. I actually think that it's a really outstanding story, but the execution is iffy.
Right. Yeah.
And one thing about this that some movie fans may notice is that it looks and feels a lot like 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my next question. That I actually watched 2001 after watching this because I felt like I felt like this is really nothing like Star Wars at all. I mean,
Yeah.
in space, it's totally different. But I felt like it was a lot like 2001, and but 2001, I think what it does that makes it work, because I hadn't seen it in a long time, so this was a rewatch, and I liked it better than I thought I would actually, this 2001, because what they do is every sort of long, slow shot in that movie asks questions and kind of makes you, it's sort of a mystery. It's like, what does this mean? Why are they showing us this? And what's going on? And whereas this, it was just like, it's just a ship. There's no mystery of like why they're showing the ship or why they're, and I feel like that's what they kind of missed, is sort of creating sort of that mystery behind why are they showing us this? Why are we looking at monkeys? Kind of a thing that 2001 had.
Right. I think what might have helped with some of those beauty shots of the Enterprise is if there had been a character who was new to all this somehow, who was somehow unfamiliar with this and was in awe, so that we could be in awe with that character. But for Scotty and Kirk in the shuttle, and they're just getting bored, it's Tuesday. They're not experiencing this sense of wonder, so it's not serving the characters to, Yeah, no, I follow that. Still, I will argue that the Starship Enterprise is one of the most beautiful objects in pop culture that's ever been created. There's something about it. I've been in love with it for a long time, and so for me, I do get something out of the long look, to an extent. But it does slow down the movie. It doesn't really serve the movie. It would make a fantastic YouTube video, but not a motion picture. But it's 1979. What's YouTube?
Right. I guess kind of jumping a little bit back, but so this, from what I read, it sounded like they really wanted to have another sort of, they wanted to have something to compete with Star Wars, but this is so different than Star Wars. And so I had the thought of, do you feel like at all they were trying to be the anti-Star Wars, like to be the opposite of Star Wars in a way?
I don't know about that. I don't think they wanted to be the opposite of Star Wars in the sense of losing money instead of making money. I know that much. But there is an aspect there is a way in which it is very much like Star Wars, because it in terms of the language of cinema, it does partake of old stuff the way Star Wars does. Well, not in the same way, but it does tug on familiar strings, right? This goes to Robert Weiss's participation, I think, in the movie. He's an old Hollywood guy.
Right.
So he uses a lot of the old Hollywood stuff. He uses an overture. The things that stand out of this movie is Jerry Goldsmith's soundtrack.
Yeah.
And it does have a grand feeling about it that you can't escape. And I, as a fan, watching it this time and thinking, putting myself in the shoes of someone who hasn't seen Star Trek in years, I'd be just so thrilled with these aspects of it being so just epic feeling. and that now I feel like I worry that movies lately are losing some of that feeling of grandeur. The last time I felt anything like that was usually it's in Christopher Nolan movies where I feel that sense of, well, this is an event. Anymore, it's starting to feel like I'm watching an episode of a TV show, and I have to wait 2 years between episodes. With a lot of popular movies, anyway.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying for sure. That I think of like, for me, I like the original Avengers movie kind of had that feeling of like an event. It was it's this thing we've been all waiting for. But you're right. I think that we have so many movies now that are made compared to back then. I mean, I just think about it even in the world of animation, which of course is my where I love the most. There was something like 30 animated films in 2015.
Oh man!
I mean, there's practically one a month, sometimes two a month, depending on the month.
And they take years and years to make.
Yeah, I mean, so that's just one example, and so it is kind of it's good in a way because we get so much to enjoy, but it's also bad because it does sort of dilute the specialness of it all.
Yeah.
We could be getting 2 Star Wars movies a year at a certain point. We get 2 Marvel movies. We get we get a superhero movie every month. We had,
right, yeah.
It's
this year especially, it feels like, wow, it's just relentless.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so we're fans saw this, and for all they know, this is it, right? Their favorite show was canceled after 3 seasons.
Right.
For all they know, this is the only Star Trek they're ever going to get in the movies. So okay, let's go out with a bang.
That makes sense. I mean, I feel like you can kind of tell though it had a lot of rewrites and stuff. I feel like the story feels a little muddled. That it could have been. I feel like they had, I don't know, just things with, let's say, like Spock's sort of role in the picture was sort of not developed very well and was kind of muddled. And I don't know. I just think you can just kind of tell that they took a story idea here and a story idea here and a story idea here, and then tried to kind of make it all work.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Spock because there was a missed opportunity with Spock. There's this great scene where he's, Kirk has just Spock has gone out in the spacesuit too, and he's back from that adventure, and he has he comes back basically as an expert on V'ger in a way that no one else on the ship is because he's had such intimate contact with it. So he's in sickbay, and Kirk wakes him up, and he grabs Kirk's hand and he says, "This simple feeling is beyond anything V'ger can comprehend." And that is such a great moment because it sort of is like it shows that Spock and V'ger have the same problem. They don't know where they fit. They don't know where they belong. They don't know why they exist. Right. So Spock has gone back, and early in the film, Spock has gone back to Vulcan on a spiritual quest, right? And that's interrupted because he feels V'ger calling him from space, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's both Spock and V'ger are trying to suss out what makes them human. They're both trying to figure out what makes them who they are. Of course, neither is technically human, right? And that's the fun of Star Trek. And we need them to not be quite human because it allows us to hold ourselves at arm's length, right? That's what science fiction does so well. But they didn't finish it. They didn't finish that idea.
Right.
With Spock. They didn't quite follow it through. Now, I think the director's cut, I understand, does a slightly better job. There's a scene where, Kirk looks over at Spock. It's towards the end of the movie. Kirk looks over at Spock, and there's a single tear rolling down Spock's cheek. And Kirk asks him, for us? And he says, no, for V'ger. Right, so those kinds of touches are nice, but they didn't quite finish it.
Yeah.
we don't see Spock finish his story arc.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a true sci-fi movie, whereas, like, again, where Star Wars is sci-fi fantasy, you know,
Yeah.
this is a real, uh, sci-fi story. And I think that sci-fi stories should sort of usually say something, like it's not,
Yeah.
and I do feel like it doesn't quite say enough. It doesn't quite earn enough. Like, and I don't know. It just feels like a bunch of different writers. And yeah, I agree with you about Spock. Like, there's some stuff there, and it's interesting, but then it's just not. I don't know. Okay, so I guess we get into sort of the core of the movie. So the rivalry between Decker and Kirk, does that work for you?
It does. I don't think it quite. I think they could have done again. It's similar. I think they could have done more with that. I would have liked to have seen an understanding between Kirk and Decker. I would have liked to have seen Kirk wonder if Decker is getting the better deal here. I feel like Kirk sort of gets lost in this movie. He's got problems. The guy's clearly troubled. Right? He doesn't have his command anymore. He's locked out of his kingdom. Even as he's piloting even as he's commanding the Enterprise through this mission, he doesn't feel at home in it. Mm-hmm. He doesn't. He seems restless. He seems out of place. Like someone, trying to go back to high school by wearing their Letterman's jacket all the time. When it was, 25 years ago or 30 years ago, it's like. He feels really troubled, and I think Decker could have showed him something. I could have taught him something, and we never see that. I think the beginning of the rivalry is interesting and compelling to me, but it doesn't culminate in anything.
But I feel like I don't think that Kirk is really teachable. It seems like to me, he seemed kind of a jerk to me, at least. Like, I mean, it makes sense that I mean, he hasn't. This ship has been completely redone, completely recooled. Yeah. Decker's the one that's been involved with that whole process, and so for Kirk to come on and be like, "You're out, I'm in," you're done. I felt like that was kind of dumb. I mean, it's a smarter choice, especially with all these things happening with the Klingons, and everything. Like, it makes more sense to like use the wisdom that you have instead of, I don't know. I just felt like he was kind of a prideful character.
No, definitely. Yeah, one thing about that is that there's a trope in the series where if there's an admiral from Starfleet comes on board the ship or an ambassador, always they're a jerk. There's some pushy bureaucrat, some pencil pusher who comes on board the ship and tells them what to do and has no idea what they're talking about. And Kirk is that guy in this movie.
That's interesting.
he falls right into that role beautifully. And of course, we're supposed to be on his side because he's Captain Kirk, but come on. But so it would have been interesting if they could have done something with that, and it would have to be Bones. That's another thing. Bones doesn't get much to do other than be cute.
No, hardly anything.
I know I love his stuff in it, but he doesn't have anything to do. At one point, he does try to reassure Kirk, "Your people know their jobs. Let them do it. You're pushing them." Right. Mm-hmm. So he does. You see him serving as that wise counselor that we know him to be. But again, it wasn't finished. We didn't see that wrapped up. The more we talk about it, the more what I'm seeing here in terms of the characters is a lot of loose threads.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt that way too. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I felt like they could have made all the characters, but especially Kirk, because you're supposed to be rooting for him. He's supposed to be likable, or at least if he's not likable, make him have a character arc that's interesting, whereas
Yeah.
really doesn't grow that much. He doesn't change that much through the course of the story.
Yeah.
And okay, so my next question is, do you feel the romance between, how do you say it? Ilya,
Ilea.
Leah, Ilya,
Ilea.
Ilea, sorry, Ilea and Decker. Do you feel that is compelling? Do you feel it's developed well enough?
Um, it's interesting. One thing about that, I think that's sort of a remnant of the TV pilot aspect of this.
Okay.
And actually, that is, now that I think about it, that is one area where I think it is tied up and not beautifully, but they do finish it. They do finish the idea of Decker and Ilea, because they do end up together, right, and being essential to finishing V'ger and making V'ger a whole being. V'ger needs both of them together in different ways, and that's cool. But one thing that Star Trek fans may notice is that okay, so those moments when Decker, when Ilea first comes on board the ship, and Decker's like, "Oh, hey," and Ilea's like, "Oh, hey," right? They know each other. They have a history.
Right.
You have that same moment in the pilot of Star Trek: The Next Generation between Counselor Troi and Commander Riker.
Oh, interesting.
So those, you look at Counselor Troi and Commander Riker in those movies and that show. Ilea and Decker are in their DNA, right? Or rather, Ilea and Decker are sort of a rough draft of Troi and Riker. In fact, even their names have a familiar ring to each other. So there's that aspect of it. So I think there was this idea maybe that Ilea would be a recurring character or something like that, and Decker would be on the show as well. But I don't know. I think that might be part of what's going on there is TV stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, because I feel like in order for it to sort of emotionally pay off, you have to feel for the characters and really sort of be invested in their romance. Like, did you see Ex Machina last year? Because that was a sci-fi movie where there's a sort of a building relationship that's somewhat similar in a way, but the payoff I think was more compelling because you were more invested in both characters and both there's a robot and a person who's falling in love with the robot.
Actually, that's on my watch list. I'll have to get to that.
Yeah, I mean it has some. It is rated R, but
Yeah.
it has some robot nudity. But other than that,
Okay. Yeah, no, it's all right.
it's really good film, I think. And I like it more sort of the more I think about it. But I feel like I don't know, just for any relationship with any characters in any movie, like you have to be kind of invested in both the individuals in order for the relationship, to work out, especially if they're going to kind of make such a sacrifice, at the end based on this love. You have to feel that love, and I don't know if it really was successful in that. There's just not enough time spent on either character, and there's not enough time with them spent together to really.
Yeah, actually, it makes me mad because it's like, okay, you couldn't have cut 30 seconds out of that beauty shot of the Enterprise to make time for these characters that are interesting and we want to know more about.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I think one thing you can say about movies now is that it seems like in a post-Avengers world, it looks a lot easier than it used to make all these moving parts work and tie up all these threads.
Sure.
It's almost, I think we're getting to the point where it's like we're not amazed by that anymore, that they can do that. I was when I first saw Avengers. I was like, wow, they really did it.
Right.
They really did. Everybody got enough screen time. All the character arcs were wrapped up. Everything was in a pretty bow. I thought it would be a mess. I thought it would just be it would just be a floppy, all over the place, shapeless piece of nonsense. Because I was like, no, it's too much. There's too much going on. And you know what? Star Trek: The Motion Picture had too much going on. It was a little too big for its britches, I think.
Well, and I think what you were saying too about how like there wasn't really a narrator or a person kind of working us through sort of the emotions of the story and working us through, like
a point of view character.
Yeah, like you get with Luke in Star Wars, that he's the one he's being introduced, or Harry Potter is another example. They're both being sort of introduced to all of this world, and so we kind of work through it with them.
It kind of makes some gestures towards that with Spock a little bit, but
yeah.
But he's kind of hard to access. We don't. It would have been nice in that first scene for him to have a moment maybe with his parents. In those early scenes where he's leaving the Kolinahr, right? He's making a major life choice because something is calling him from space. But he doesn't have that exchange with his parents, who we know and like, and where there would be an emotional connection. He has a conversation with T'Pau, who's like this remote priestess, right? Who she's like, okay, fine, go if you want to. I don't care.
Right.
So the moment doesn't have a lot of emotional weight for us. We don't. It does not. That isn't transmitted to us what that means to Spock, and what throwing that necklace down should mean more than it does in that scene.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so my next question is, so what do you think of the concept of the cloud, the Viger you said? V'ger, sorry. V'ger. Yeah. It felt like, to me, it felt like a prolonged birth metaphor. You've got to have, I mean, it even, people say, of course, that it looks even like female anatomy. We won't go into that, but it really does feel like, that like there's this, it needs to create this life, and you have to have, I don't know, like it just felt like a little heavy-handed, I guess, with all of sort of when you combine the imagery with it's sort of, I don't know, what do you think about that whole thing?
Well, I think V'ger is a classic. I love this. You're reminding me of Dr. McCoy's great line early on. Why is it something we don't understand is always called a thing? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the classic Star Trek thing that appears to be our enemy, but turns out maybe not to be our enemy, or maybe isn't quite so hostile as we think it is.
Yeah, because yes, they has to absorb all of this, and then in order to sort of create a new life, it felt like I said, sort of a birth metaphor, and it's to absorb all the pain and the bad and everything in order to sort of birth a new life, and it's just like, oh no.
Yeah. It definitely partakes of 2001 in that way, and but I think it's trying to. The thing is, a Star Trek story on the big screen has got to be big, and so if you're not saving planet Earth from a terrible fate, you're birthing a new cosmic form of intelligence, right? It's got to be that. It's got to be on that kind of scale. It cannot be, solve a problem for the fuzzy wuzzies on planet X, right? That it cannot be that provincial. So there's that. That's been an argument against Star Trek as movies for a long time. Is that its natural, its native habitat is TV, and we're seeing it out of its native habitat. We're seeing it in an unnatural format. So that's an aspect of this too.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, do you think that they were going for that, or people just sort of reading too much into it as far as some of the imagery and everything like that?
Oh, were they deliberately trying to make it look like lady parts or something, or is that what you're asking?
Right.
Oh, that's a good question. Um, you'd have to ask the visual effects director about that. I have a feeling that it was more unconscious than anything.
Yeah.
Um, and
Do they use a lot of visual symbolism in Star Trek? Like, is it, or is it usually pretty straightforward?
that's a good question. It depends on the thing is that it's had so many people involved with it. You know, Star Wars is pretty straightforward. Yeah, a lot of people have been involved with it,
Right.
but it's a small group, right? They're outnumbered by emperors and men who've been in space. It's not very many people who have been in charge of what Star Wars is going to be.
Right.
Um,
Pretty much
so
three.
yeah,
Four. I guess if you count Lawrence Kasdan. Four.
right. It's been Star Trek has been a much larger group involved, and yeah, Gene Roddenberry gets a large share of the credit. But anyway, my point being that a lot of people have had a chance to do it. I can think of a lot of instances where, yeah, the visual imagery has been very symbolic and significant. Actually, the thing about it is that I'm more of a verbal guy than a visual guy. So there's visual stuff I miss.
Mhm.
But now that you got me thinking about it, I'm thinking about like the shoehorn shape of the back of the bridge on the Enterprise Next Gen.
Right.
Where it's very embracing, right? It's reaching out to embrace the unknown, right?
Yeah.
Or the look of the look of the ships, and so it is something that I have contemplated.
Like normally I get annoyed when people bring in sort of Freudian kind of, that sort of analysis into things, but in this case they just talked about life and creating had to create this new life, and I don't know, it just felt like I'm like, boy, this is they're talking about birth. This is a birth metaphor, this whole thing.
Well, sure, yeah.
Like a strange thing for a sci-fi film to kind of, but I guess maybe not. I mean, I guess maybe there are birth metaphors in sci-fi, but I don't know. It just felt odd to me.
Yeah.
um, okay, so that's kind of those were my main questions. I have to say I didn't really care for the film as far as, but there were some things I liked. I liked the visuals were, it was really pretty, and all the sets and everything looked beautiful, and I thought that the acting was fine. I didn't have any big problem with that, and the music, like you said, by Jerry Goldsmith was really good. I just feel like there wasn't enough mystery, so then it made it kind of boring, and I felt like the birth metaphor was more awkward than compelling. But I don't know, like, what do you have uh, any? I mean, I feel like I should have even more questions, but do you have anything you wanted to talk about as far as the story?
Well, a couple of things I did want to point out was that, like, in terms of, okay, yeah, you're starting. It sounds like you're kind of going to, okay, look, is this recommended or not, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Look, this is hardcore Star Trek. Like, this is Star Trek for the initiated. So I'm not surprised that you didn't care for it that much. It really helps if you have a context of how this fits into the larger picture.
Yeah.
Of what Star Trek is. Because some of the significant things about that happened in this picture. I mean, like, we first hear the Klingon language uttered for the first time, right? We hear the Vulcan language uttered for the first time. We see we see a look at Vulcan that we haven't seen before, right? And Vulcan culture is developed further there. The Enterprise looks real for the first time ever. I could go on and on. There's so much. There's so many reasons this is important to Star Trek, but it's not important to cinema.
Right.
It just isn't. It's not. It's not. It doesn't deserve to be in the what is it? That 100 best movies of all time. Right. It has no place there. It's apples and oranges to compare this to to try to situate this in cinema, in movies. But it isn't in terms of Star Trek. In terms of Star Trek, it's very important, and actually it's very good if you just consider Star Trek as its own universe, as its own thing. Do not start here. Do not start with Star Trek the Motion Picture if you want to get into Star Trek.
See, that's probably my problem then, because I kind of did.
Yeah.
The only one I've seen is, like I said, the 2009 one is the only other Star Trek. I've never even seen an episode of the show.
Yeah, actually, that's not a bad introduction. 2009 is not a bad introduction. And maybe we'll get into that another time. But.
Oh yeah, we will definitely. Yeah, I mean, I thought that was a fun little movie. I like I said, I know nothing about the characters or whatever. And I don't have a problem with a real audience specific. People might say it's fan service, but I don't really care. If you want to make I think there's no problem with making a film for a target audience that are gonna love that movie, and that's fine.
If in a world where it's okay for there to be a Sharknado movie and a movie called Surf Nazis Must Die, I think it's okay for there to be a Star Trek movie.
Yeah, I think so. All right, cool. Well, did you have anything else? I was pretty hard on it. I admit it on my Letterboxd review that I did, just because I just thought the birth metaphor was really off-putting, and I really thought it was boring. But maybe I was a little too harsh. I do appreciate they tried something really different, and it doesn't feel like a Star Wars copycat, which I think would have been easy to do.
Oh yeah.
At that time.
And those were left, right, and center at that time.
Yeah, and so I kind of appreciate they tried something different, and sometimes you try and sometimes you succeed, but I appreciate the attempt to really try something different. So
yeah, and it is, you can't deny that it's ambitious. They're going for a lot here, and they just didn't quite pull it off. But I'm the kind of movie watcher that can forgive a multitude of sins if I sense an aspiration to something really grand.
Yeah, I think so. I asked the other day on Twitter, would I rather watch something that's lazy and just kind of mediocre, or rather watch something that fails but tries really hard. It's interesting because certain movies, like Shyamalan movies, I hate Shyamalan movies.
Mm-hmm.
But he does try really hard. But oh man. Yeah. But yeah, no, I can appreciate that they did try, and like I said, it's not a total failure. I did like some of the ideas, and I thought it was pretty, and I thought that the music was great. It was really good. So yeah, I'm glad I saw it, and I'm really excited for Wrath of Khan.
Cool. Yeah.
That one's going to be fun. I've heard such good things about it.
You should be looking forward to it. But it's a couple of things about that. You'll notice a change in the uniform.
Uh-huh.
And I was just reading on the uniforms because apparently the onesies that they were in the motion picture. So.
Oh, okay. Well, cool. We'll talk and figure out when we want to talk about that. When works for all of us. And I've heard that the Star Trek movies are the odd one. I mean, the even ones are the good ones.
Yeah, the even ones don't suck. Yeah, that's the general rule.
So that'll be fun. Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Sorry for all the technical issues. I don't know why it's doing this to me, but I feel like we had a fun conversation, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Where can people find you? If I'll have the link, but do you have a blog or Twitter?
My Twitter feed is @ElMonoRoboto. My website is tgunwriter.com. tgunwriter.com.
Great. Okay, well, I'll have that in the description section too if people want to check that out. And
cool.
Thanks again.
Thanks, Rachel.